friends, good morning. This is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and I know it's Monday, so many of you may not be home to be able to really sink your teeth into this video, but you might want to remember it when you get home so you can watch it. I'm going to do not too much of a deep dive because I don't feel as though I'm expert enough on this deck to be able to discuss it fully. But I want to do a video on a deck that I've had for a number of years. I think it came out in 2001, something like that. So it's been around for a while. And when it came out, it made a great sensation. I mean, everybody did videos on it. Everybody was talking about it, and everybody wanted it, including myself. Now, I've only been doing videos since 2016. So when this came out, I didn't have a channel, and then by the time I had a channel, I didn't think to do a video on it. So there are dozens and dozens and hundreds of videos on this particular deck, I'm sure. And but the thing about it is, maybe nobody's talking about it anymore, and so maybe they're buried deep. And I thought it might not be a bad idea for me to do a video on it, especially since I'm reviewing decks that I have that are in my collection that I don't pay a whole lot of attention to. Now, when this deck came out, I paid a lot of attention to it. It had a rather thick book, and I read it from cover to cover, maybe more than once. And I definitely used the deck quite a bit at that time. What is the deck? The deck is called Tarot of the Holy Light, created by Christine-Payne, and the artwork was by Dowers. Now, I may have a different box than you. This is definitely the first edition, but I think there have been subsequent editions whereby the artwork may have changed either on the box or the book or something like that. The book that comes with it, had the same cover, a big, thick, chunky book, and anything you want to know about any of the cards is in this book. So it's it's a great match, right? Now, there's another book that Christine-Payne wrote, and it's called The Underground Stream. I had this book before I had that deck, and it's very interesting, her understanding of the ancient tarots before the occultists, and which is what this deck is about. It's about tarot before the occultists got their hands on it. She calls this style of tarot the continental tarots. And the artwork, before I flip the camera, the artwork on this deck is digital. So there's some modern day technique used to explore images from the 1600s, right around when tarot was already a thing in the 1400s, but perhaps still early enough in the early days. And she finds and focuses on artwork from the 1600s that all have to do with all things metaphysical. And she puts it and showcases all those things in one deck. So let me flip the camera and we will get started. Box is a nice sturdy box, pretty simple, pretty basic. It has a little white book, but if you really want to really get into the meat of the tomato and a deep dive, you need the book. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that this deck, shucks, I must have shuffled it. I got to put them in order. The other thing I want to mention is that there's an app called Holy Light. I forget the name of the publishers, or the app company that puts it out, but it is the book. So if you buy the app, which is only like $5, I think it cost me $4 or $5. I don't know what it costs now, but if you buy the app for this deck, it contains everything that's in this book. I mean, really everything. There may be a small section it doesn't contain, but the contents of this book is in the app. So you have a lot of resources for this deck. Let me put it in order. I thought it was in order. And we'll get busy as soon as I do that. And here are the backs of the first edition. I know that subsequent editions have a different back. The cardstock is linen. I don't know how more recent cardstocks are, but this one has a linen finish, front and back. I think it's on the back, maybe not. Yeah, you can see it, slightly textured. Now, as I said, this deck takes advantage of all the wonderful metaphysical features that were written about in the early days, right after the Renaissance, right? So we have astrological references here. We have alchemical for sure here. We have Kabbalistic references here, and others that I'm sure I'm not remembering or thinking of. Now, Christine-Payne describes this as a continental deck, because it was perhaps the information that was relevant in Europe, particularly, continent, right? Not this continent, but theirs, prior to when the occultists got their hands on tarot. So you see all kinds of images in all of these decks. Now, if you want to critique on the deck itself, I will mention superficial things, like, for example, on the cards of the higher order, or the triumph cards, the names of the cards are very hard to see because they're superimposed on top of the pictures. And sometimes, if the picture has got a dark background or whatever, or a white background, they can use either black or white ink on the picture. But sometimes it's hard to see. Now, if you're familiar with the images, it's not much of an issue. But with the pip cards, their associations with whatever she wants to make a connection to are on the bottom, as are the names of the cards. And so it's a lot easier to see on the pip cards. So here, the first thing I see with the Magus is, an alchemical reference to Mercury, right, and the caduceus. But there are many others. He does look like an individual with power, for sure. Astrological references in the arc above him, or the circle. Now, just because I read the book once or twice doesn't mean I retained everything in it because, sometimes if things, don't come naturally to me, I don't retain it. I mean, I try to understand a lot of things that I don't readily know about, and definitely I did a deep dive when this deck came out. But perhaps it's a matter of having to teach old dogs new tricks. When tarot came out, I had to teach myself. Okay, I taught myself by virtue of reading whatever I could get my hands on, and then also just coming to some conclusions or figuring stuff out by myself. But there wasn't a whole lot of material, esoteric material, for me when I was 17 years old in the suburb of Philadelphia, So much of my learning about deep diving came later, right? And I grew up in the age of Aquarius pretty much, where, astrology was everywhere, and I had my astrology books, but I never glommed onto it or understood, what this and that house means. I know what houses my stuff is in, but I have no idea what any of it means. So here we have, they call it the High Priestess. So it is a bit of an occultist name, rather than what she would have been called before the occultists. But that might be a nod to modern day readers who, maybe need that reference or that name. But you can see that the symbolism, each card is packed and very rich with symbolism that, a 15th person from the 1500s, or excuse me, a person from the 1600s would readily pick up on. Now, with all the bosoms on this woman, we get a sense that she's the mother nature, mother of all. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what the author had intended for this, but that's the feeling I get without understanding the reference or without remembering what the reference was to a woman with all these bosoms. But to me, you definitely can pick up on the idea that she's a mother to all. She's mother nature. At least that's how I would see this card. And then again, we have the sun and moon, which figures prominently on most cards of this deck. We have the eagle of the emperor. Let's see if we had the eagle in the empress. Was there an eagle here? There may be. I'm just not seeing it. I don't see everything, but there's a sun and moon here. And he's a very active god, isn't he? A very active emperor, rather. He almost looks godlike. And this is the Hierophant. Now here we have a lover card, which is unusual. We have a pair of lovers above, and maybe they're the same couple in a clandestine moment. Maybe they have a private kind of love affair going on. I don't know. It gives a different connotation than what we're maybe accustomed to seeing in the Tarot of Marseille or other decks. And, this deck, because there's so many images that are adjacent to tarot, or like you could, if this were to show up in a reading for somebody who's missing a cat or a pet, and like, where can I look for my pet? Where could it be? The first thing I would think of is, well, maybe it's by a brook or near a water or near a bridge, or have you checked the sewers or the pipes, that kind of thing. And has nothing to do with lovers. I guess that's why sometimes I don't use too many decks with pictures on them, because it becomes more like an oracle rather than a tarot deck. Tarot for me, and my definition of tarot does not have to be yours, right? And you don't have to have the same thoughts as I on tarot. But for me, because of the way I learned and the way I feel about it, it's a deck of cards, and the cards have a few things. The cards have numbers, they have suits, they have court cards, and then they have a higher order suit, the triumph cards, right? And so once I understood what they meant, it wasn't necessary for me to seek out, like astrological associations or Kabbalistic associations or alchemical associations. All of those clues can help someone understand what they're looking at if those are the disciplines that they understand. If they grasp those concepts and they see it in a card, I don't know. I can't speak on this, but I suspect it would readily help them understand the gist, for example, of the Chariot. Right? But if you already come to tarot with an understanding of the Chariot, then I think you can certainly read this deck without concerning yourself too much with all this other stuff. The Hermit, the Wheel, well, the Strength is 11. The Hanged one. The Devil. Tower of Destruction. The Star. And I think it's interesting that she references the Aquarian image for the star rather than just a symbol of the star, which had been used in the earlier tarot decks to represent the star. There was a card, the Metelli card, references the star as the wandering old man that we now probably would think was the hermit, right? But the focus was on the, supposed to have been on the star in the sky. And we have the Sun with a pair of lovers, the Moon, which is readily recognizable. My understanding, too, is that with the astrological references, especially when they're labeled on the card, isn't that a beautiful moon card? World card. Isn't that lovely? Oh, I have it out of sequence. Judgment. Is that I think the thing that kind of got me too confused to use it was because when I realized that the astrological qualities she assigned to what they call decans varies, from other decks that have astrological references. So I was like, man, it's hard enough for me to keep track of it in general, but when they have different associations and it's too much for my little brain. My little brain can't hold on to all of that. But you don't hear anyone talking about this deck anymore. You don't really see it anymore. So I thought it would be nice to bring it back up and to show some of you, especially if you're interested in doing really deep dives into the Mason. I know there's a lot of Mason references, right? So if you're interested in really picking up on those really old references, this would be a good source. This book, this deck, the app, and then the other book I showed you, The Underground Stream. Now, I think to some extent, some of what she feels is a little on the controversial side. I haven't read a whole lot about the controversy, but I pick up on the idea that, that there might be some, look at this now, the Nine of Swords. Now, I would never know that this was the Nine of Swords because the Nine Swords is really an afterthought. You could barely see it. So I think for me, as a person who reads, pips and suit and I do numbers and suit and origin stories, I think for me, I soon became, it was just too hard for me to look at this and readily see that it was the Nine of Swords, And so I think for me, all the imagery became a little bit of a distraction for me, but that's because of my own shortcomings, not because it's not a great deck. It's beautiful. It is truly a marvel because it's so lovely. And so you do see there's a reference to, a zodiac sign. So even if you don't know anything about astrology perhaps, and you're doing a reading for someone who has a love interest who's a Libra, you may notice that, and it may become part of the discussion that you would not have normally thought of discussing. Things like that. But that would be just the most superficial understanding But for those of us who are not into astrology, it's still an asset to us, right? If we want to use it. And there's so many images here that you almost don't have to, like, I guess I would think that that would be the Ace of Cups. I think I would know that without the name. Okay, definitely would figure that out. And it's been so long since I've looked at this deck that when I was going through all my decks and trying to just make use of the decks that I never use anymore or that I kind of forgot about, and I saw this, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to do a video on this because I don't think I ever did. Look at that. Now you see, you know, we have the Nine of Cups, which it's identified, then it gives degrees and what it's ruled by, and then, or this ruled by that, right? But as I said, other people don't agree with those deacons, you know, so I don't know. Once I learned that, I kind of thought, oh, if it's hard for people who know astrology, then what chance do I have? And as I said, I stopped using, I tried in earnest, and I make a grand effort. I mean, I read the app, the entire app, which was essentially that book, and I read that book, you know, the whole book, and I read her other book. But I essentially just began like reading it like it was an oracle deck, you know, looking at the pictures more than I was recognizing what the cards were, you know. So it just, when I used this deck, I was a little farther away from, you know, my tarot understanding, and so I think I just eventually gave up on using it. However, it's definitely worth, you know, meditating on. You know, if I see an image if I see an image elsewhere, this would be a really great source to come to find out what that means. You know, when I mean this source, I mean her books, you know. If I were to find that image in one of the cards, I would go to that card in the book and then look it up and see what, you know, the description was about. Look at that. Three of Wands. And I wouldn't necessarily figure out that that was the Three of Wands, you know. And I'm not quite sure how I would relate my understanding of the Three of Wands with this three-headed snake. But it could be, you know, something that's, when something has three heads, I don't know the implication, maybe, you know, duplicitous, perhaps. But once you have a picture and the picture is more prominent than the suit and the pip, the suit and the number for me, it becomes more of an oracle. We have an eagle and a lion here. So I don't know what changes have been made to more recent editions. I don't even know what edition they're on. But this is the version that I have. I think it can still be purchased. I don't think it's out of print. Now the Queen of Wands has more of a Empress look, right? We have the eagle or some type of bird of prey. She certainly has a crown, but she has a queen. So I can see how there might be some confusion if there wasn't names on the cards. So that's the Aries. So I get Aries and Taurus confused. Oh, there's my card. I'm a Leo. it's a very dynamic understanding and association for 4 discs. So if you want a deck that would have taken all the old school ideas of the metaphysical world and nature and alchemical and Kabbalistic and astrological and Masonic, this would be a good deck to check out. So I hope this video has been fun for you, and thank you for being here. Give me a like, please. If you haven't subscribed already, please give me a subscription. I hate to seem like a beggar, but it's very important, and it helps me in understanding the kind of things you want to see. I put out a video sometimes and I think, oh, everyone's going to love this and nobody likes it. And I don't get any new viewers from it. And then I'll put something else out. And, within hours, it just blows away, the count is just crazy, and I'm like, wow, they like that? Like when I did the other couple, like a week ago, when I did the video on, what was it on? Oh, like stinker decks that I had that I never used, that started this trend of mine now, showing decks that I don't really use that much, right? And that one was so popular. I was like, dang, who would have thunk it, And then I did a true crime. And when I do true crime from old time crime stories, I don't really get the response that I get if I do a true crime story that's relevant today. And the true crime readings that I've done recently, had a lot more than, other readings that I've done, which I thought was kind of interesting. So when you give me likes and thumbs up, and when you subscribe, I know I'm on the right track, and then I'll undoubtedly give more true crime readings. I try not to do true crime that's relevant today, because there are people who are alive who are deeply affected by some of these crimes. And I don't want to put things out there that a family member could be hurt by, and because you never know who's looking, and you never know who's watching, ever. And so I usually will do true crime. I have done modern day true crime, but I try to keep it so that no matter what I say, a family member won't be hurt, or something like that. But most of my true crime, and I'm going to be doing one next, so my next video will be true crime, but it will be an old true crime story that's 90 years old. So, and maybe a fun way for some of you to learn about that true crime, right? It might be a good time for you to learn about it. At any rate, until next time, friends, peace and stay well.